That picture came from Mother Jones Magazine. Any of y'all ever heard of Mother Jones Magazine? It's liberal to the liberal. It's so far out there. And this reporter wanted to come to Angola, and I wouldn't let him. And he sued me, so I had to let him because I let other people in. But then I left, so I wouldn't have to talk to him. And he made me really look good because his catch was when he left that if you came to Angola, you had to find Jesus or he wouldn't let you go. And so that was a good deal. But back to this, I know we probably don't have any school teachers in here, but you might. So do we have any school teachers with us today, or anybody ever taught school? Got a few. Okay, right there. Well, I taught school. I went to LSU to be a school teacher, VOAG education, and I went to the classroom to do that. That was a noble thing to do, and I made about 3 months, and I told the principal, I said, listen, this is the worst job in the world. I can't stand these kids. They're running me crazy. And so I don't know if I can keep doing this job. And he said, well, let me tell you one thing. If you break this contract, I'm going to see that you never teach again. I said, good, I'm out of here soon. So these school teachers can run the prison, I promise you. But anyway, that's kind of my story about how I got started in corrections. But I want to tell you, it's a very noble profession, what we all do. And the main focus we should really have in our mind is victims, because we want less victims of violent crime. We have to remember what corrections means. Most people forget the word. Corrections means correct deviant behavior. Doesn't mean lock and feed, torture and torment, or what have you. It means correct the deviant behavior. And that's what we try to do. And I guess about 15 years ago, I was executing a guy, and Secretary LeBlanc, that's our secretary now, was a fellow warden, and he was there as a witness. And so the guy had been in our prison before, and he had gotten out and murdered someone. And so when we finished the execution, and I told Secretary LeBlanc, and he was agreeing. He told me, because we have to go to the room where the victim's family is. We have to talk to them because a couple of them can witness, and we have to say, okay, it all happened, all this thing, it's all done and so forth. And they think they're going to feel real good, and it's going to help before they do the execution, but they really kind of leave with a heavy heart because it really didn't change anything. But anyway, the other thing we do is we go to the victim, we have to go to the inmate's family too, because he had a mama, and he had a family, and they didn't commit a crime. They're good church-going folks. And so you have to go in there and you have to talk to them too. And you really realize that nobody wins, and we already know that when it comes to murder and crime, but we also realize there's victims all over the place. So we committed ourselves that night. We looked at each other. We said, we have enough experience. We have learned how to change the prison. We just have to commit ourselves to doing it. And we come up with the term moral rehabilitation. We don't say faith-based. We don't say any other word about God or what have you. We just talk about moral rehabilitation. Now, here's the deal. Let's talk about who's a criminal. A criminal is somebody that's selfish. He don't care anything about what you have. If he wants it, he'll take it. He's a bully. He's all about himself, period, all about himself. Now, that's basically who he is. You don't have to go to school 4 years to learn who's a criminal. And then why? Because why? So we have to change that mentality. If we can change that, to change him from being a taker to being a giver, we can rehabilitate him. So that's kind of what we launched out to do, and that's where we really got going really strong with our religious program, but really it was before that too. Because when I went to the penitentiary, I didn't want the job, way back in 1995. And so they coerced me into it because I had 13 years experience at another prison. So I had the most experience of anybody in the state, and I should be able to do it, but I didn't want to do it. It was too violent. Warden were the paid fall guys, and we are, and so I'd lose my job in a few years. Anyway, took it temporary, but we did the first execution, and then I knew I had to stay. But I knew I didn't know what I was doing. To thine own self be true. So I would pray to God to give me the wisdom to make the next decision and know what to do. So it made me get real close to God myself, plus that execution did, because I kind of didn't do that right. I felt like I sent him to hell, and I didn't say anything to him about his soul, so I vowed never to do that again. Anyway, that's kind of how I got started, and so what really caused me to really go to praying and get back to my own roots. And I was one of these guys raised in a country home. We didn't even have a caution light. And my mama made me go to church every time the door was open. And it was Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And I got so tired of going to church. And I hated to go to church so bad. At one time they had a revival and they're going to have a morning service. And we said, Mom, we're not Catholics. We shouldn't have to go to early morning mass. But she made us go anyway. So when I got to LSU, I said, I'm fixing to learn all these things she didn't let me know. I'm fixing to have me a good time. Well, I did, almost to the point that they like to send me home, and that would have killed me because they would have beat me to death probably. So I had to tighten up at the last minute and try to eke by and get off probation and make it. But anyway, I stayed pretty much that way till I got to the Angola, and that really changed my life myself, but it brought me back to my roots. But let's talk about the seminary. And I know Representative Baxley came, and several of you did, to see Angola. But the real game changer was that. It came in 96, actually, right after I got there. And I didn't ask for it, fell in my lap. I wasn't that smart. I don't claim credit for changing Angola. It was a God thing. I didn't know what I was doing. But the seminary was the real game changer because when we started, we had a lot of problems. And we're going to have some time for questions at the end with the staff and all to buy in. But I explained to the staff, if you're a Christian and you're going to fight this seminary, you're fighting God. And when you get to the pearly gates, I feel sorry for you. So you better tighten up and get your attitude right about what we're trying to do, because this is God's work, it's not my work. So that kind of brought them all around. But anyway, we started seeing our culture change real quick after we started doing that. And where did we get? In 2000, we sent the first men down to walk into the prison, the first women down to walk into the prison to be the correctional officers. And now look, this is a maximum security prison. We have, at that time, 5,108 inmates. And what we would do is there was murders, rapists, armed robbers, habitual felons. There was 4,000 lifers, and if you had 50 years on your sentence, I sent you somewhere else. I only kept you if you had more than 50 years. So therefore, real hardcore prison. Now to send a woman down there to the dormitory to be a correctional officer, we all realized she didn't guard anybody. They let her guard. They let her guard them. And so, but that's how safe the prison got 4 years after the seminary was there. So I commend you, and I commend Warden Lamb and Warden Olson, because they started their seminary, and I visited yesterday down at Hardee, and they right on the track. They right where we were, perfect. You're doing it. You have an opportunity to change the culture of prisons in this state, not just Hardee. There's some things you're going to have to do that I'm going to tell you later you got to be willing to do. One thing is, y'all are having a justice summit, okay? We have to look at what we do, and we have to break tradition. Because if you stay traditional, you'll do the same thing you did. And Warden Lamb told me, he said, I grew up in corrections, so I do what I was trained to do. Well, the good news for me was I didn't grow up in corrections. I was over there trying to teach at school and got run off, and I went to work in corrections, but I got appointed to a pretty high position by Governor Edwards at the cabinet level. And so I went from there to be the warden of a prison, so I never really worked in the prison until I was the warden of one. So that made me very non-traditional. If it didn't make sense, I didn't do it. If it was common sense, I did do it. And so I question all those things they did because. And that's what your challenge is today. Whether you're a sheriff, whether you're what are you, you have to really be non-traditional. Times change. We have to change with the times. What you did 20 years ago, you don't need to do now maybe. Laws change, people change, cultures change, the environment changes. From being a kid that go out and work in the yard and do whatever, now they're kids that do joysticks. So you got to deal with all those kind of things because that changes them. So we have to be non-traditional, and that's what we are at the penitentiary, non-traditional. I tell you, the seminary was a real game changer because it created a culture change. The culture within the prison changed because inmate preachers started to go and visit other inmates. They started to sit on the bed with them and pray with them and so forth, but they changed their spirit. They changed them spiritually, and God changes people. Now here again, we don't tout that we're going to be Christian, we're going to be anything else. We don't care what you are. We care that you morally change. We care that we have moral rehabilitation in our prison. We don't claim to be Baptist. We don't claim whatever. Now, if you wanted to know what the religion of Angola is, it's Baptist-Costal. That's what it is. And so because it's rocking and rolling, and that's what they're doing, and so it's cool. But anyway, that's how that works. But let's take you way on over and jump forward to a new program we just started. I really want to tell you about it. It's real important. You heard of drug court all your life. Well, now we have what we call reentry court. The legislature passed a bill, and we have 5 judges in 5 parishes, which would be 5 counties, that when they have an inmate that's violated the law and they're going to sentence him, they sentence him to less than 10 years, then they'll sentence him 10 years, but go to Angola to reentry court. Now, we didn't have any money. Tax dollars were gone. They were scarce. No money anywhere. We were lucky to have that big old rodeo. We built that dude real big, so we diverted the funds and the profits out of the rodeo, and it brings in $4 million a year. We diverted it over to the reentry programs. So there was our money. So we didn't have to ask the taxpayers for a penny. Now, other people can't do that, and y'all not going to do that, and I'm not here at all to advocate that because I don't see how we get away with it. But anyway, we do. So the point is, the inmate comes to Angola, and here's who his teachers are. We have no teachers. We lost them in the budget cut. So the teachers are all lifer inmates who have skills and trades and who have been certified with those skills, who have 4-year degrees from the seminary, which is accredited just like Florida State. And so that's a legitimate degree. If my phone is ringing, I'm so sorry for not turning it off. Let's get this thing off right here so I can talk. Now then, so the inmates are the teachers. Well, who ever heard of inmates teaching another one? You talk in prison, they say, well, one inmate can't have any authority over another. Well, I say, well, why? Why is that? And so if the inmate has changed his life, if he's a moral person, then he can. And then he does it very successfully. And that's what's so important to us. So they go there, and that's the teachers. But let's say, take it a step further. These inmate teachers live in a dormitory with these inmate students that's coming in. And they're their moral mentors. They teach them anger management. They teach them all these skill sets under the direction of the social workers, but the social workers don't do it. And so therefore we change them there. Now what happens is we get them a skill in a trade, like welding, like what have you, but it's all skills and trades. Then they go back to court, and the judge will change their sentence to probation. But it's going to take about 2 or 3 years to get through all these programs and skills and be a skilled welder or what have you. Then what happens is probation pro steps up because they play a major role in being sure that he goes to work and he follows the law and he checks in and so forth, and they drug test him. Now what does the community do? The community steps up because they have been fined a job. And probation pro does too. So we put him on a job right out of prison. The court has probation pro monitoring him. He now has a skill to make a decent wage, $15, $20 an hour. If he were an automotive mechanic, he'll have an ASC patch on his arm. That's what you see when you go to the dealer. He's going to have a certification big time. He may have 5 welding certifications. He can weld MIG. He can weld TIG. He can weld all this. He can do pipe, whatever. Therefore, we made him employable. If you go to a business owner and say, I want him to sweep, I have an inmate, he needs a job, he can sweep the floor, they don't want him. You go to the inmate, you go to the guy who owns the car dealership and you say, I have an inmate that has an ASC certification, he don't care. He'll hire him immediately because he wants to use him because he's going to make him money. He don't care, especially if we're going to watch him at drug testing. So what we did is we made the inmate employable. But what we did is we saved another victim. Because if we don't do that, he's going to get out of jail, and he's going to come right back to prison. That's when we have 50% recidivism rate, 1 out of 2 going out. So are we doing our job as corrections in corrections? No, we're failing because we're not finishing the job. Now, I challenge you this. I didn't have any money. They took my teachers too. They took everything we had, but we were creative to keep it going. But we got way outside the box. Now, here's what happened. Nothing. We didn't have any problems. Nothing happened. The inmates felt better with themselves. We improved their self-esteem. They produced more, and everything worked better for us. And so, therefore, it was a success. It's a successful program. Now, it's going to need more money. We've got to have more parishes in and so forth, but we proved it worked. Now, let's go back to the seminary. Let's talk about the culture in the prison and how we want to change the prison. This is probably one of the worst prisons in America at the time I went. I did not change it, a God thing, but if it could change, anybody can. Now let's take it one step further. After we started graduating these preachers, and there's about 280 of them, we started sending them in pairs of 4 and 6 to all the other prisons. So their culture changed too. Now here's why. You have a preacher at your church. You go to church every Sunday and he preaches, and he's there in the community, and he marries the daughters and sons. He buries you, he consoles you, he does everything. He's your spiritual leader. You have prison ministry, and it's good. We have to have prison ministry. But the prison ministry folks drive up, they do their little deal, they get in the car and they leave. Well, who meets his needs that night if his mama died? Who meets his needs if he's having trouble with another person or something in his life? There's nobody there to do it. So what if you're a preacher in your church, preached in the church on Sunday, got on an airplane and flew to the Bahamas? And he stayed in the Bahamas until Saturday, and then he flew back and preached in the church, got in an airplane, and left again. Now, how successful would that church be? You fall apart. So you see, prison ministry, the way we do it, won't ever get the job done. It's good. Got to do it. But it won't get the job done. When that inmate preacher that's trained for 4 years, has been trained in counseling, has been trained like any preacher, he's really got some good training. He goes in there, he is the preacher. Now this is so far out, and I told Warden Lamb, you got to take little bitty steps, baby steps. It may take you 10 years or 15 years, but that's where you're going to get to. And when you get to that, you're going to have safer and safer and safer prisons. You're going to have less and less victims of violent crime, but we had to prove it. So how do we prove it? I have good fortune in Angola. I can raise money. There's several people, if I call and say, I need $100,000 to do this or that, I'm going to get a check because they trust us, because we do things for bricks and mortar. We don't waste it on administrative costs. We can get the money. So we wanted to research this program we have, this seminary, and we wanted Baylor University to do it. And so we got it hooked up with a guy named Tim Horner. Any of you ladies ever heard of Premier Design, Premier Jewelry? They come to your house, sell the jewelry. That's the company. They do us a wonderful job. Excuse me. So we need $1.3 million for Baylor to research this seminary. $1.3 million, 5-year research. Okay, so we get in the plane, fly over to Dallas, Texas, go see Tim Horner, and I know him real well. He's been to Angola. I go to see him, and really cool. We named our seminary after his mom. And I say, Tim, this is Dr. Byron Johnson from Baylor, and this is Senator Patrick, who is now the Lieutenant Governor of Texas. We need to talk to you about some help with research. We need some money. He said, what do y'all need? I said, well, we're going to need about $1,300,000. He said, well, I tell you one thing. If I had to pay for any research, I don't want any students doing the research. If I'm going to pay that kind of money, I want PhDs doing it. Well, we were already in the door, and we just started the first sentence. And so Dr. Johnson kind of perked up over there because he got excited. And he said, just what are y'all going to do? And I said, we're going to prove this seminary worked. But because we had found out, I can come tell you what I just told you. But if I don't have the data, I can't really convince you. But if I can lay the data on the table, then I got you. Because then if you see the data, you see it work, and you have a wherewithal to do it, and you don't do it, I would say that word starts with the letter S. But anyway, I'm not going to call a word, but it doesn't make sense if you have the wherewithal to do it. So we engaged in that, and in a minute, Tim Horner said, well, I tell you what. He said, Dr. Johnson, do you think it works, what he's doing? He said, I think it works, but it's not going to ever work if we don't prove it. He said, well, if that's what it takes to get God's word out there, I said, I'm going to help you prove it, so you got the money. That took about 10 minutes. And Dr. Johnson fell over on the table, hit his head, just like that. Never had he raised so much money so quick without somebody saying, I got to go down and get the CFO to look at it and all this kind of stuff. Got the money. Guess what? The research is over. The book is coming out in July. It worked. We can prove it worked. It worked phenomenally well. It took 3 things to make it work. This is a struggle now for states, all the states, and not just here. 3 things made it work. You have to be non-traditional to do these 3 things. One is we have the inmate church in Angola. There's a whole bunch of churches. And I'm talking about inmate pastors that have groups in their church, maybe up to 250 inmates. And on Sunday, they in the pulpit preaching just like they are in your community. And they got assistant pastors, and they got all this congregation they're leading to do good. Don't break the rules. Don't do anything bad. Admit everything in your rap sheet because God's looking at you and you can't hide it, and quit living a lie and quit running around here doing drugs and all this kind of stuff in this prison. Be moral, noble men. Now let me ask you this. What did that hurt? I mean, what did that hurt? So then I go into other states and they say, well, the inmate can't preach because he has authority over other inmates and that's all bad and so forth. I say, well, come see me. And so, but anyway, it's baby steps. It'll take 10 years probably to get there in this state, but you will get there. And when you get there, you're going to rejoice because you're going to save a lot of money and you're going to have a lot less victims of violent crime. I promise you. All right. So what happens? The religious community begins to support the prison, really big time, because they're afraid of the inmates, but they're fearful, but they worry about their soul. I've had this told to me over and over. We don't want to come to that prison. I don't give you. I worry about their soul. I want you to go up there and save their soul if you can, but I don't have nothing to do with them. They're evil. Okay, I got it. That's how they feel. All right. So they like we doing it. So the PR and the Louisiana Baptist message and everywhere you go and churches want you to come talking at churches, and it's making everybody look good. Makes the governor look good, makes the Department of Corrections look good, makes everybody realize, hey, we changing lives. We doing good. And so, therefore, what's wrong with that? That was cool. And we still do it and have a safer prison. Violence dropped about 70% in Angola over this period of time. We can go one weekend with 6,325 prisoners and not have a single fight. And that's a pretty big prison, a lot of people. Most towns can't say that. So I really jumped ahead. Let's talk a little bit more of the social things that happen with the seminary because they preach the funerals. They sit on the bed with them when their mom dies. They keep calmness in the prison. They're there and because they direct all the anger towards God. If they hear that something's going to happen in the prison that's not good, they're going to let us know. They're not going to let us know because they're snitches and rats. They're going to let us know because they're good citizens. Because we don't like that word rat because if I see somebody doing drugs on the corner of the street in my community, I'm going to call the police. Well, don't call me a rat. Call me a good citizen. And that's what that means. So we quit using that term too. Best part was, or one of the good things was, the inmates come to me and say, Warren Cain, y'all are cursing too much. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, your mama wouldn't like that either because you do it too sometimes. I said, you're right. She wouldn't like that at all. Now, whoever heard of an inmate coming to the warden and giving him a little criticism? But hey, wait, he was telling the truth. So I said, okay, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stop cursing. We're going to all stop cursing, but y'all are too. If you don't do it, there's going to be sanctions. We're going to have sanctions for everybody. Okay, cool. So today, if you walk anywhere in Angola, you will not hear one word of profanity. There's no cursing. It's cool. It's what happened. Now, what did that mean to the security staff? It meant when we stopped cursing them, we were less oppressive to them. So we ratcheted down the tension a little more. But what does it say to the home? Because when you're in the home and you're screaming out all these profanities, how much tension do you have there? So it's a good example. Now we start this program, Malachi Dad, because the inmates, as they got through the seminary, went to worrying about their kids. They said, my kids are more apt to come to prison than other kids. I don't want my child to come to prison. You got to help me figure out a way to do it. Well, all these inmate preachers are all trained in how to do all this counseling, so we start Malachi Dad with Awana. So now what they do is, when the kid's having trouble, they're linked up to their dad. They can write letters. We don't do phones, but they can write letters, and the inmate pastors can work with them to work on how to solve the problem, and it can be a dating problem or whatever. But he gets back engaged in his child's life, no different than a soldier who would go off to Iraq and be gone for a year. So then he starts to work there. Now that takes us to the next program we just started. We have all these kids now in the community. Most of these kids are in urban areas. So now let's do the Onesimus Project. This is our latest one. People will say, what you going to do next? I said, I don't know. God hadn't told me yet. Well, he told me about Onesimus. You've never heard of this program. It's brand new. We're just developing it. We already got our first preacher out, and it's working. The Onesimus Project is we want to send inmates that get out with short terms back into the urban areas. Well, where are they? All manner of lifers. But I just told you they're sending me all these guys from court. Okay? Plus, I got some other short-term inmates now that I can practice on with these lifer inmates. So they're the ones that can go back to the community as an Onesimus preacher. So what happens is a suburban church puts up the money to pay the preacher in the urban church who was an ex-convict, who was a preacher in the urban church, who then has all these kids that are in Malachi Dad in the community to go out and be the toehold so he can work with them and start getting them to come in to be morally rehabilitated. Now, it has to be different kind of pastors doing it because everybody's not going to the same church. We got to meet the community standard and go to all the different kinds, all the churches. So we have to have more preachers, more ministers. But we can link up the suburban to the urban. We can link up the community again, and we can change the culture just like we did at Angola where there's no gang. I have no gangs. The gangs went away because what happened, they got in the church, and this preacher was trained gang leader, if you want to call him that. He knew how to lead all these other guys. He got all them working for good instead of for evil. And then we know what they're all doing, so we can keep up with them, and we can watch them, and if somebody falls, we can yank him up. And then we diluted so many of them that our security is way more effective because we don't have everybody to watch. We just have this few that won't change. And it's like fish, you can't catch them all. You're never going to change all of them. So it's all about diluting them. And so that's how it worked. Anyway, it's really a pleasure for me to come and talk to you about this. We have hospices. We have a hospice program. Inmates do all that. They really lighten our load for the medical department. They save lots of money. We got to have less costs in court. We don't go to court as much, and we don't get sued as much. So a lot of good things came from it. I really enjoy being here with y'all. I'm going to close. Most people tell a story when they start, but I like this story because it happened kind of where I was. I'm on the board of directors of the Brooklyn Tabernacle with Pastor Simbala, where they have the Brooklyn Tabernacle Choir and all that. But anyway, in New York, these streets are real wide. This guy was going down the street, and he had a CNI dog. And so he stopped at the red light, and all these people come congregated up around and waiting for it to go, and the dog stopped him, and the dog was standing there, but the dog turns around and cocks his leg up and urinates all over this man's leg. So the man goes to fumble in his coat pocket. He feels it wet on his leg, and he fumbled in his coat pocket, and he finally pulls out a dog treat. And he reaches down there to hand a treat to the dog. This lady is standing there by me. He said, "Mister, don't you understand that dog just urinated on your leg? Don't you realize you're fixing to award that bad behavior?" He said, "Look, lady, I'm just trying to find its head so I can kick it behind." So I thought I'd leave y'all with that a little bit. He told me I'm supposed to talk an hour. I'm hoarse. So anyway, you don't need to be talked to an hour. Next thing. So I'd be glad to answer any questions you have. Yes, ma'am?
Your returning heart program for the children of offenders that come onto your compound. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I will, because for these guys in this Malachi Dad program to mentor their children and so forth, it was better that they could see them and interact with them because we wanted them to have a chance to lead them to the Lord. So we started the Returning Hearts program, and that's an Awana program with us. There's some others around that's good. But anyway, Anyway, they needed to see their kids in a different environment than the inmate visiting room. They needed to see them one-on-one and be able to talk to them and be able to visit with them and spend a day with them. Now, I got a call. We did this program. I'm just going to say it right up in the front. I got a call after we did it, and it was in a newspaper and pictures, and there was a picture of this guy spending a day with his son, inmate. And so this guy called me, and he said, "I can't believe you have that program because I saw that man visiting with his son, and that's the very man that killed my daddy. And I never got to visit and play with my daddy. I grew up without my daddy because of him, and you let him play with his son." He was from Shreveport, Louisiana. I said, "Look, I really hate that, but here's really the deal. I can't help your dad. I can't do anything for your dad. I wish I could. But what I want to do is, we did this for that little boy. We didn't do it for the inmate. We did it for the little boy. Because the little boy is probably going to grow up and be like his dad if we don't change him and allow his dad to help us change him. And we don't want somebody else to be like you to call and say he didn't get to play with his dad." So it's all about the little kid. And he said, he understood. And he said, "Well, I'm hurt, but it's okay because I understand what you're doing. You're trying to change the little boy. Just so long it's not about his daddy." I said, "Well, I hate his daddy too. Shouldn't have done what he did to you." It's true. But we skated by the victim because you got to always keep victims first because victims always have to trump in our business. You cannot offend the victim. You just can't. It's just wrong. But we have to educate the victim as to what we're doing and why we're doing it. And if we do that, most of them will buy into it. Some won't ever, and I don't blame them. I may not could ever either. We just have to try to feel their pain, and we never can, but realize it's beyond imagination, so don't question it. Anyway, they spend a day with their kid. Now, to do that, you got to have that many volunteers come in for every inmate you have out there doing it. So in my case, I have 500 inmates. I have to have 500 volunteers, so that's 1,000. And I'm going to get 3 or 4 kids, 2 or 3 kids at least for each one. So I might have 2,000 people, but I have this big rodeo arena. You don't have that. You got just a yard, somewhere you put off to the side. But then they come out and spend a whole day with their dad, and all these mentors are with them and walking around with them. They got all these games to play, whatever have you can find. But what's most important is we take their guardian who brings them there, and we have a magnificent lunch for them, but we have social workers and other people to talk to them about parenting, about how to do it alone, how to make it, and answer the question and the problem that they're having raising those kids, because it's all about the kids. And then we have music, and they love the program. 3 o'clock, they all come pick up the kids. They leave their dad. We all cry. They get in the car and drive away. So sad. Crime is horrible. But that's a wonderful program. It goes with the seminary. It goes with all these other programs. So we're doing that one too. Thank you for your question. Anybody else have a question?
Other questions? Hang on a second. Let me get the mic to you.
I saw, it might have been Sunday morning show, the Angola prison, the rodeo, and everybody working on their project. You know, you said they each have they're allowed to start their own business and sell their own work. I saw a special on it, and if you could tell these people what that was.
Yeah, that was 60 minutes.
It was great. It was
And what that
amazing.
is we have this, the rodeo, and then we have an arts and crafts show. An arts and crafts show on any given Sunday is going to bring in about $300,000 just for arts and crafts sales. But here's what this is. This is an entrepreneurial program because it's part of reentry. We're teaching an inmate how to create something in his mind and then how to manufacture it and get the raw materials, and they give him a little loan to buy his raw materials. Then he's got to go market it, and he's got to make a profit and then keep enough of the profit so he can restock his wares just like any business. And then we just completed it we'll complete it tonight, graduate from money management class that we have for the inmates. And we have people that teach money management, and it ties into this entrepreneurial program to teach inmates that skill, because some people are entrepreneurial, and if they are, then they have a place to market their wares. And there's every kind of thing you can think, but here's the deal. If you make junk and trash, you're not going to sell it. You got to come back, and you got to make it good. You got to hone your own skills and develop that, and while you're doing all this, you're being good, because you're not out there giving me the blues, running around the prison, acting crazy. You're over here trying to make something, be creative. Now, here's how that works. A hobby shop has these tools and things in it. So here's the deal. If we find any of those tools in the prison, or if you make any weapon, or we find any weapon in a hobby shop, you miss the next rodeo. Now, that's tremendous peer pressure, because they are their brother's keeper, because we as citizens have to worry about the community, and we are our brother's keeper. You know, we have to visit our neighbors, know what's going on, and we have to keep everything going good. And so if they tell us that there's a weapon in the hobby shop, and we get it anonymously, that's how we want it. I don't want to be told. Just give me a note. And so then we'll go find it. We don't close the hobby shop. But if we don't get the notice, then we're going to close it, because they know what's going on in there. If there's a cell phone, they need to be telling us. Now, here's how that works. When I walk around the prison, I tell them I'm hard of hearing. You know, I'm really not that much, but I don't have time to stop and talk to all of them, because they want to tell you their life story every time they talk to you rather than get to the point. So I want to just hear the point. So I say, look, y'all, I can't hear you. Write me a note. When they see me coming, they're going to be writing notes. I'm going to come out of there with my pockets bulging. I'm going to have all kind of notes, and everybody's seen them give me notes. So if one wants to give me a note that there's going to be some kind of right, I'll get the note. Nobody will ever know who gave it to me, and it'll be no harm done. But if I didn't make myself askable, now here's how this works. We created a new word. It's called askable, and that means if anybody asks you a question, you got to answer it, because knowledge is power in prison. I was in a prison in Minnesota, and everybody walked down one side of the deal and couldn't talk. I spoke to an inmate, and he couldn't speak back. I thought, man, y'all better get a grip. They could be burning this place down, and you won't know it. You better be talking to them, because you want to prevent fire. You don't want to fight fire. So the word askable is on the boards, and everybody knows to be askable. And that way then we have access to what they know, and we're going to answer it, and we're going to fix it. But they're going to ask to be trustees. They're going to ask all kind of stuff. They may tell me the food's horrible. Well, I better watch out. Good food, good medicine, good playing, good praying, and good prison. You drop one of those components, you're going to have problems. So I got to have all four working good together. So that's where the article comes in the little notes. So I have the knowledge. That's how it works. Well,
Other questions? Yes.
I thought about to not have any more questions. I was going to say I did a good job. I did a really pretty good job, and I appreciate the questions.
Ward Cain.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate all the work that you have been doing as far as our criminal justice system, and I've been following your work for about 6 years now. And of all the programs that you have developed, your hospice program is one that really, I think, is amazing because you're contributing that to mankind. Can you share with us your hospice program?
I can. I was sitting in my house. I got the missionary program in the shower. That's where God spoke to me on that one. I'm sitting in my house. I can remember where I thought of it, and it just happened. It just popped in your head, and I know that's God talking to you. It's crazy, but I got the hospice thing on a Sunday morning, sitting at the table, and all of a sudden I thought hospice. I need to do hospice, have all these preachers. And so they said, oh, it won't work. They're going to take the drugs out of the prison, out of the hospital. They're going to steal the syringes. You can have all these problems with that. Never once. But here's the thing. If you don't try it, you won't know it. I'm telling you, we're back to tradition now. So I said, well, we've educated all these inmates. We got all these preachers. If we let the preachers be the caregivers, we have to trust them. We've already sent them through school for 4 years to be a preacher and a moral man. And so let's trust them and try it. But let's tell them this. It's a sacred program. You're all going to die here. If you want to be ministered to in hospice like you're going to be ministering to these other guys, then you got to be worthy. And you can't desecrate this sacred program that's a program of God. So I preached to them. Now remember, Muslims have the same God we do. We just forked off back up there at Abraham, a little way down the deal. So we talking God to everybody. And so they can buy that. Now then, what you going to do? Hey, we not going to mess it up. You let us do hospice. We need to do it. Get that man back with his community, back with his friend that he grew up with. We're going to take care of it. Okay, cool. We're going to try it. Means we're going to give them fruit. We're going to give them oranges. Well, they're going to make whiskey and beer out of oranges. Well, maybe not in hospice. We're going to have grapes. Oh, they're going to make wine. That's going to be real bad. No, maybe not in hospice. So we did it. And it worked. Never had a problem. I've never had anything taken out of hospice. I think if you brought something or stole something out of there, I think the rest of them would just work you over because the whole thing worked with peer pressure. There's a lot of pressure to be good. I wish I'd have brought that slide. I had an inmate that was walking and preaching, and he had a towel in his hand. He propped up on his deal, and you'd think he'd put T.D. Jakes out of business. He can preach the paint off the wall. And so he was just walking and talking, and he got on his own rap sheet. He said, everything in my rap sheet's true. You know everything in your rap sheet's true. Now I want you to admit it right now. We fixing to have an altar call, and I want you to get up here and come to the front and give it up for Jesus and admit what's in your rap sheet and admit you did it and try to figure out if there's ever a way to say, I'm sorry to the victim, you will, and let's just come clean. I mean, sweat coming off of him, his shirt's all wet, and he's just walking and preaching and won't turn loose. That's powerful in prison. It's phenomenally powerful. I stopped going to church anywhere else. I go let the inmates preach. I mean, it's cool. I really like it. Plus, I'm with them, and I get more notes. Problem with the notes, you got to answer them all. So the secretary was complaining, so I started writing them handwritten notes. And they'll just copy that and put it in his record and send a handwritten note. Well, then one of them was graduated from the seminary, and he held up a note that I had written him 5 years before, and it encouraged him to go to the seminary and change his life. And he said, I took Warden Cain at his word, and here's the very note he wrote me, and he read the note to the congregation, all the people there for the graduation. Really made me proud. Probably one of the proudest moments of my life is to know that that guy went to the seminary and changed his life over that little old note I wrote, just a little old flip-over note. So see, it's all about talking, communication. It's all about make them human. It's all about non-tradition. And it worked. And it worked at one of the worst prisons in the country. Any one of you ladies can walk anywhere in Angola, death row, anywhere you want to walk. There's no whistles, no cat calls. Nothing's going to get thrown on you, and everybody's going to act normal like we do here. You can get an admin seg. Now, there's some that's crazy. I have to back off of those because we do have some mental health issues. But they're going to be nice. And so we don't have to go in there with any kind of getting all this excessive use of force and all that. It just worked. It tamed the beast within them. Any other questions? Okay, yes. Back in the back.
Hold on.
Hope I'm making sense to y'all.
You are.
This is all true.
When do we get to come up there and visit Angola?
Well, we visit about 2,000 people a month.
And that's what I wanted to ask you about. How many people have been there that have talked to you about your principles, which are that the worst of the worst can change, which is a biblical principle, as we know. How many people have looked at that as far as all criminal justice down to the county jails and beyond that? Have there been any studies or any other places, or have you worked with any jails about possibly looking at these same principles with short-termers?
We are doing this. We plan to do this. That's our next step. But we double the capacity of our seminary. So we got to go faster and produce more because the sheriffs are wanting some inmates in their jails. We have about half the inmates in Louisiana are held at the parish level or the county level, and the sheriff does that, and you probably do some of that in Florida. They want the inmate minister at the jail, but they got to be willing to status reduce this guy, and we got to get a lifer from Angola to the jail, or at least somebody with more than 20 years, because we don't want short-termers in the seminary because we don't get any value from them. They get through and it becomes personal so they can get parole or pardon or something like that. We want you to give us we want to get some bang for our buck. But the sheriffs are going to be using them. It's going to work wherever they go because it's just like a real preacher going anywhere they go. And see, this inmate feels that other's pain because he's incarcerated too, whereas a prison ministry guy can go home and be with his wife and children. He said, oh, you're going home and feel good. You're going to leave me here. Well, when the preacher stayed with him in the prison and lived with him, that's the game changer. But yeah, we're moving it further. And here's the deal. There's 8 states doing this now. You're one of them, and you're doing it really good, and I commend you for it. And you're going to take baby steps, and you're going to have an inmate in a pulpit at some point. Because what they got to do is build trust with you all, and they're doing it. And I told them they better do it. I talked to them yesterday. Anyway, that's good. But once that happens, then you give. You know, they got to prove themselves before you can give anything. It's just time, and that's great. But anyway, it's going to work here. You got it in Florida. You got it with us. You got it in Georgia. It's not quite working as well at all. You got it in Mississippi. Not quite working as well as all. And I didn't tell you the 3 things makes it work. I got to tell you that before I close. You got it in New Mexico. It's working good. You got it in Texas. Working phenomenal. They just graduated their first class. Now have field ministers in other prisons. The change is already apparent. And so we have it now in Calvin College. We want to do a northern state, and Michigan is doing it. They'll be at Angola day after tomorrow. I have 4 senators coming from Michigan just to check and see where they're going to go. And then it's 8 states. West Virginia is the other one. We're real close in California, and we're working in other states. Wisconsin is coming. We have legislators coming from Wisconsin to see it as well. And I've already been to Wisconsin to talk to them. Monday, after New Year's, I have lunch with the head of the ACLU. And she and I are real good friends because I had to learn real quick how to skate by them. And I learned how to keep the separation of church and state where it's legal. And that was real important. Y'all are doing that too. You know how to do it. The point is, I want her to tell me what I'm going to run into in other states so I can really try to make a real national program so we really can do this all over the country because it will change the culture of prisons in America. And now we have the data so we can prove it.
Warden, I have a question for you. The newspaper and the radio station and the television station, do you have to exert a bunch of control if you had things on there that weren't complimentary or weren't appropriate?
No, the radio station had disc jockeys that are Bible college graduates normally, have to have a good voice. It's a Christian radio. It's not a Christian radio. It's a religious radio station basically. The Muslims have a time on it. On Friday, they get time. Everybody gets time that wants the time. And it's 24 hours a day, and it's hooked up to Moody It's also his radio network, HIS. I think y'all have that here in Florida, Georgia. They gave us $120,000 in 4 hours. They raised it with a telethon to do the radio station. That was the easiest thing I ever did. We put that on the air, and it just money poured in. Bought the radio station. Cost about $100,000. That's how I talk to the inmates. I go to the radio station. I can address them all. We sit around and talk on the radio. We also have a TV station. Costs $85,000 by Premier Design again, and that works well. We have not had any breaches in any of those because one thing we're watching and we're hearing what they're saying, and if they got off out there bad, they'd be in the gar hole. Not really. They'd
How
be
about
locked
the
up.
newspaper?
But anyway, no
about your
problem with
newspaper?
that. Here's the three components you got to have. Okay, you got to have the seminary, number one. You got to allow them to have the church, because you have to have the seminary to train them. You have to allow the church in the prison that has an inmate preacher. You got to do that. And then you got to give them access to the prison. I had it in my pocket, but I guess I put it back in my suitcase. See if I have it. I don't so. I had an ID card. It says inmate minister on the back. With that ID card, inmate minister, he can go anywhere in the prison. Now, when he goes to a cell block, we're going to strip search him. When he comes out, we're going to strip search him. And he likes that because we're keeping the inmates on the cell block from trying to coerce him to do things because they know we're going to watch. But he goes everywhere in the prison, calms them down. I had two on mental health watch the other night, and one on mental health watch, and I sent two preachers to go over and talk to him. They came back and said, hey, there's nothing we can do with that dude. I said, he's crazy. So send a social worker. But at least they tried, that we felt good with it, we tried it. But that's what you have to have, and you have to give them access to the prison. Some prisons, see, that's what happened in Mississippi. They won't give them access because they're still traditional. They're afraid they're going to do bad somehow. So they're educated, but they're sitting in their dorm where they live all together. Now in Florida, in Georgia, they started letting them out a little bit, Phillips Prison. Okay, any other questions y'all have? I've enjoyed being with y'all. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I want to know the training your guards get. Is it different? Do you closely train them? It sounds like there must be kinder than a lot of guards.
Will you repeat the question?
No?
Horrible, the guards can be horrible. Do they have intensive training? Do they get paid a higher wage?
No, I tell you why. The inmates change them and by their behavior, and you'll have them tell you that. The correctional officers are going to be as the inmates make them. If the inmates are bad, they're going to be worse, always. And so what's the prison doing? If the prison's rocking and rolling, they rocking and rolling. But when the prison settles down, they settle down because they don't have to do it because nobody's acting out. So they get calmer too. So the inmates changed the correctional officers. I didn't. The only thing I had to do was give them access, and what they do, they'd slow walk, they'd count, and make them late for school. And so I said, the ones doing that is the demon on the gate, and you're fighting God, and I'm going to be compelled to put you on a night shift where the devil is. He's in the dark. So if you keep on dragging around and fight with God, I'm going to put you in the dark. You're not going to like it. So they could understand that. I explained it to them. I couldn't understand it for them, but they understood that. So.
One last question. I read somewhere, Warden, that nobody has ever successfully escaped from your prison.
Well,
I heard the alligators
I'm
were
very
5,
lucky.
the inmates were 0.
I'm very lucky. I have. We've never lost an inmate we didn't catch. And we're very, very fortunate because I really, when I got there, I have really good bloodhounds, and we practice all the time because we will run for the sheriff. We have some sheriffs in here. If Louisiana sheriffs have anybody that gets away from them, excuse me. And even in Mississippi, we just cross the line and go help them too. It doesn't matter if they call us, we're going to go chase them. And our guys like to do that. And when the dogs catch you, we pet the dog, and the dog wants to be petted. There's no biting, no growling, all this. And we don't be brutal to the inmate at all because we want him to tell us where he went and how he got away. If he ran from us, were you over here when we were over here? Let's talk. Let's sit down here on this stump. We're going to drink a Coke. Here, have a Coke. This has been a real fun game. I'm glad we won. So where have you been? That's how I learned it. I learned that he said, he said, we won't let them smoke on the drops because they'll see the fire. So he said, well, it took 3 days to catch this dude. He was going towards Baton Rouge. He was going to Washington, D.C. He said he was going to straighten up the government and kill some people up there that was messing us up. But anyway, he got lost the next morning. The next night, when he woke up and got to looking where he was going to run, because he was only moving at night, he was looking at these real bright lights, and there was two sets. One was here and one was over here, and he had to choose. Well, one was Angola, because we're bright, and one was Baton Rouge. He made a bad choice and turned around and came 4 miles back to the prison. And so that's how we caught him. I've had some real Lulus. I had one escape out of prison hunt because he wanted to come to Angola. That had been in my prison. I sent him to another one on New Year's 2 years ago. He broke out and called me on the phone. Said, I'm trying to get to Angola. Will you come meet me? So I called the secretary and meet him at 1 o'clock in the morning. He said, it's a setup. They're going to shoot us. I said, bring 2 guns. I have 2. Let's go. And so I met him in Baton Rouge, and that was about an hour and a half. We talked to this inmate on the cell phone the whole time. And the secretary trying to give him directions as to how to get out of St. Gabriel, Louisiana, where the secretary is from, so he can meet us on the road. And so finally he says, uh-oh, there's a cars behind me, and they got red lights. Secretary says, okay, you caught. Pull over to the side, put the car in park, kill the motor, stick your hand out the door so they can see you don't have a gun. So he said, okay, I'm doing it right now. Pull over, I've stopped. Got the car in park, killed the motor, put my hand out the door. Then we could hear all this noise because we had our phone on the speaker, so I could hear it too, my iPhone. And so all this noise going on and so forth. And so then all of a sudden this law officer, which was Sheriff Ambrose, Chief Ambrose from St. Gabriel Police, he said, who's on this phone? And Secretary Staller said, this is Secretary Staller. He said, yeah, right. Slapped that thing closed. So the next morning I had to call Chief Ambrose, and Secretary LeBlanc is modest. He don't like press. You know, he's kind of shell-shocked. So I said, I'm telling the press. I cannot let this happen and not tell the press. So I called the press to tell them, but first I called Chief Ambrose. And I said, Chief Ambrose, that really was Secretary LeBlanc you hung up on last night. We had that inmate on the cell phone. Well, he couldn't believe it. So then when I called the press, they really couldn't believe it. So it made headlines about this inmate that escaped from one prison trying to get to the other one. Problem was he escaped in the ambulance, so he was easy to see going down the road. Anyway.
Well, Warden, thank you so very much for being here today. Let's give him a hand.